Throughout history, certain remarkable individuals have appeared like comets across the night sky, introducing ideas so revolutionary they've forever changed our understanding of the world. Many were tragically unappreciated in their time, rejected by their peers, ostracized by society, some even executed for challenging established beliefs. It often takes decades, sometimes centuries, before society finally recognizes the true value of their contributions. These aren't just smart people. They're not just highly intelligent. They represent something far rarer, once-in-a-century geniuses whose minds operate on a different plane entirely. Isaac Newton revolutionized physics. Leonardo da Vinci reimagined art and engineering. Nikola Tesla foresaw technologies we're still catching up to today. Giordano Bruno dared to suggest the universe was infinite and paid with his life. But for every famous genius whose name echoes through history, there are others equally brilliant whose stories remain in shadow. These forgotten visionaries shaped our modern world just as profoundly, yet most people have never heard their names. One of the most extraordinary among these overlooked geniuses was an Indian mathematician whose short life burned with an almost supernatural brilliance. Srinivasa Ramanujan. Born in 1887 in Rewrote, India, Ramanujan entered this world into circumstances that couldn't have been less promising for a future mathematical legend. His family was poor, his homeland was under British colonial rule, and his deeply religious Brahmin family had priorities far removed from Western mathematics. As a child, Ramanujan showed early promise in school, but nothing that would hint at what was to come. Then something magical happened when he turned 10. Like a switch flipping in his brain, he discovered mathematics and everything changed. What began as curiosity quickly transformed into obsession. Mathematics wasn't just something he studied, it became the lens through which he viewed reality itself. His grades in other subjects plummeted as he poured every waking moment into exploring numbers and their relationships. By 13, Ramanujan had mastered college-level trigonometry entirely on his own. Not content with solving existing problems, he began creating his own theorems and formulas. His teachers were baffled. Here was a teenager working out complex mathematical concepts that they themselves barely understood. Then came the book that would change everything, a borrowed copy of A Synopsis of Elementary Results in Pure and Applied Mathematics. This wasn't light reading. It contained over 5,000 mathematical formulas with minimal explanation. For most people, it would have been impenetrable. For Ramanujan, it was like being handed the keys to a kingdom. He devoured the book, working through every formula. But he didn't stop there. He began extending the theorems, finding patterns the original authors had missed, creating entirely new mathematical pathways where none had existed before. His obsession came at a steep price. Ramanujan failed his college entrance exams, not once but repeatedly. He could ace the mathematics portion blindfolded, but other subjects? His mind simply couldn't stay focused on them. Scholarships were awarded, then painfully revoked when he couldn't maintain passing grades in English or physics. Like Einstein and Turing after him, Ramanujan existed in a kind of intellectual isolation that few can imagine. He quite literally had no peers, no one to challenge him, no one who understood the equations dancing through his mind. His teachers couldn't comprehend his work. His classmates couldn't relate to his passion. With each passing year, he withdrew further into his own mental world, a universe of pure numbers where everything made perfect sense, unlike the messy, confusing social world around him. His family watched in growing despair as his academic career imploded. Every attempt at formal education ended the same way. Brilliant performance in mathematics, catastrophic failure in everything else. School after school expelled him or watched him drop out. Find a job, his family urged. This mathematics obsession leads nowhere. With no degree and mounting pressure to support himself, Ramanujan reluctantly took a clerical position. By day, he worked as a humble accounting clerk. But at night, by the light of oil lamps, he continued his real work-filling notebooks with breathtaking mathematical insights. He'd solve problems on scraps of paper, sometimes using slate when paper was too expensive. When he couldn't afford even that, he practiced writing formulas in the sand. The poverty of his circumstances couldn't contain the richness of his mind. By age 21, Ramanujan had accumulated mountains of original mathematical work. Deep in his heart, he knew these weren't just interesting puzzles, they were important discoveries. But who would listen to an unknown, uneducated Indian clerk? Gathering his courage, he began sending his work to mathematicians in England. His letters, packed with strange formulas and claims of mathematical breakthroughs, were mostly ignored or dismissed as the ramblings of a self-taught amateur. Letter after letter went unanswered. It seemed the world was determined to ignore this hidden genius. Then in 1913, he wrote to G.H. Hardy, a prominent mathematician at Cambridge University. Hardy later recalled his first reaction was to throw away what seemed like another letter from a mathematical crank. But something made him look closer. The formulas were unlike anything he'd seen before. Some seemed impossible, others almost magical in their elegance. Hardy showed them to his colleagues, saying either this unknown Indian was a complete fraud or one of the most natural mathematical geniuses he'd ever encountered. After careful analysis, Hardy realized he was looking at the work of an extraordinary mind. He immediately invited Ramanujan to Cambridge, an invitation that would forever change both men's lives and the course of mathematics itself. Imagine the culture shock. A deeply religious, vegetarian Brahmin from colonial India arriving in pre-World War I England. The weather was alien, the food was inedible by his cultural standards, the social customs were completely foreign. Yet none of this deterred Ramanujan from his mathematical mission. Once at Cambridge, he flourished intellectually. In his 20s, he solved problems that had stumped mathematicians for decades. He developed new approaches to old questions. He created formulas of such elegance that they seemed to reveal the hidden architecture of mathematics itself. When asked how he discovered these remarkable formulas, Ramanujan's answer was as mysterious as it was sincere. The goddess Namagiri comes to me in my dreams and shows me scrolls of complex mathematical content unfolding before my eyes. To rational Western scientists, this sounded like nonsense. Yet they couldn't argue with the results. Ramanujan's dreams, whatever their source, were producing mathematics of extraordinary beauty and significance. But while his mind soared, his body struggled. Ramanujan had always been frail, and England's cold, damp climate didn't help. When World War I brought food rationing, his strict vegetarian diet became nearly impossible to maintain. Too proud to complain, too focused on his work to prioritize his health, he grew weaker by the day. Tuberculosis, that merciless disease that has claimed so many brilliant lives throughout history, found its way into his compromised lungs. He spent a full year in sanatoriums, fighting not just for his health, but against the crushing depression that came with being separated from mathematics. For Ramanujan, being unable to work with numbers wasn't just frustrating, it was like having oxygen withheld from his lungs. His mental health deteriorated alongside his physical condition. In a moment of complete despair, he attempted suicide by throwing himself in front of a London Underground train. Mercifully, he survived, though the incident deeply shook Hardy and everyone who knew the gentle mathematician. After partial recovery, Ramanujan briefly returned to mathematics, but something had changed. The spark was dimmer. The isolation of being thousands of miles from home, combined with his physical suffering, had taken an irreversible toll. In 1919, still weak but determined to see India again, he returned to his homeland. His mathematical fire briefly reignited. He continued sending Hardy letters filled with new discoveries, but his body was beyond repair. On April 26, 1920, at the heartbreakingly young age of 32, Srinivasa Ramanujan died. A brilliant star extinguished far too soon. Yet what he left behind defies belief. In his short lifetime, Ramanujan produced nearly 4,000 original mathematical results. His notebooks, discovered after his death, contained thousands of theorems, formulas, and insights. Even today, mathematicians continue to mine these notebooks for treasures, finding ideas decades ahead of their time. Hardy, who knew mathematical genius when he saw it, ranked Ramanujan alongside Euler and Gauss, the highest praise imaginable. Finding Ramanujan's notebooks, he said, was like discovering Beethoven's long-lost 10th Symphony. So, What could possibly lie within the pages of a notebook discovered in 1976, belonging to a young man who died over a century ago in 1920? And how could its contents be considered nothing short of revolutionary? Guided by a vision, he believed it came from a goddess, he poured his discoveries onto paper, decades ahead of his time. Now here's the mind-blowing part. What kinds of concepts did this mysterious notebook contain? Brace yourself, because within those pages are formulas that, today, help us understand the very structure of black holes. They reach into the foundations of quantum physics, even touching upon what we now call string theory. Some of them are used to calculate the orbits of satellites in space. And perhaps most astonishing of all, there are ideas buried in that notebook that connect to multiverse theories. And yes, even concepts related to time travel. Sounds unbelievable, right? The story of Ramanujan forces us to question fundamental assumptions about genius. Here was a man with almost no formal training who rewrote mathematical rules. He worked primarily from intuition rather than proof. He claimed divine inspiration rather than methodical reasoning. His life reminds us that extraordinary minds don't always come in expected packages or follow traditional paths. Sometimes genius appears in the most unlikely places. A poor clerk in colonial India working by lamplight, seeing patterns in numbers that would elude the most educated professors of his time. Ramanujan's tragically short life leaves us wondering what might have been. What mathematical mountains would he have climbed had he lived a normal lifespan? What mysteries would he have unraveled? What technologies might exist today, built on mathematical foundations he never had the chance to complete? We'll never know, but what we do know is enough to place Srinivasa Ramanujan among the brightest intellectual lights humanity has ever produced. A once-in-a-century mind whose brief candle burned with unmatched brilliance.